The room went quiet the second Cole Bannister set the silver star back down on the podium and left his hand flat on top of it, like he was keeping something from floating away. There were 61 people in the Halsey Post that afternoon. I had counted every exit before I sat down, because that is a habit you never quite lose. 2 doors behind the bar. 1 beside the flag. 1 through the little kitchen, where the coffee urn had been hissing since noon. My heart did what it always does when a room turns on someone. It slowed. You do not get loud when the ground shifts under you. You get still. You find the flat copper taste at the back of your teeth, and you keep your back straight, because a straight back is the last thing they can take from you. Cole did not pick the medal back up. He looked at the Navy captain who had pinned it on him 30 seconds earlier. Then he looked, out of every person in that hall, at me. And my father, who 6 hours before had told these same men that his daughter had never once seen the war, went the gray color of wet cement. I want to be careful how I tell you this, because it would be easy to make it sound like a movie. It was not a movie. It was folding chairs and a sheet cake and a room that smelled like burnt coffee. But something true happened in there, and I have spent a long time deciding whether it was a gift or a wound, and I still am not sure. To understand why a Navy SEAL would set down the highest honor of his life in a rented hall in a small town in Idaho, in front of the men who raised him, you have to go back to a valley I have spent 13 years trying not to say out loud. And you have to start earlier that same morning, when I still believed the smartest thing a person could do was keep her mouth shut. My name is Dana Merritt. I am 47 years old. For 22 years I wore the uniform of the United States Air Force, and for most of that time my family believed I sat at a radar console on a safe base somewhere, sliding little green symbols around a screen while other people did the hard part. I let them believe it. That is the part I have to be honest about before I tell you anything else. A lot of what I did was classified, and the rest of it I could not have explained at a dinner table without sounding like I was bragging. And in my family, bragging was the one sin worse than failing. So when my father asked what I did, I said I worked communications. When my sister asked if I was ever in danger, I told her the food was bad and the coffee was worse. It was easier. It was a kind of lie that felt like manners. Now I drive an ambulance for a rural county 2 states over. I am a paramedic. My right ear has a ring in it that has never gone quiet since a day I do not talk about. The doctor calls it noise-induced, and I let him. I start lines on farmers who waited 3 days too long to call, and I give the same talk about chest compressions at the volunteer fire hall on the 2nd Tuesday of every month. And twice a year I roll up my sleeve at the blood drive at the Grange, because I am O-negative, and the blood bank calls me the way an old boyfriend calls at midnight. My blood goes into strangers. Not one person at that Grange has any idea it has been in stranger places than a stranger. My father is Walt Merritt. He is 72 now. He was an Army Ranger in a war that was already old news by the time I was born, and he came home from it in 1972 with a bad knee, a folded flag that was not his own, and a way of dividing the world into 2 kinds of people. There were men who had looked the enemy in the eye across bad ground, and there was everyone else. He put himself in the first kind. He put me, without ever quite saying it, in the second. I got the call about the ceremony on a Sunday. My father does not really make phone calls. He makes announcements. He told me that Cole was finally getting the medal, that it had been held up for years by paperwork nobody would explain, and that the whole town was coming. And then, almost as an afterthought, he said it would be nice if I drove up to help your mother with the food. Help your mother with the food. I was 47 years old and I had directed aircraft over men who were screaming. And my father's idea of my role at a war heroes ceremony was the sheet cake. I said yes. I always said yes. I want you to notice that about me, because it matters later. I did not say, that is my valley too. I did not say, I know exactly why that medal took 13 years. I said I would bring the good coffee, and I hung up. And I sat in my truck in the fire hall lot for a while with 2 dog tags in my breast pocket that I have carried for so long the letters have gone smooth under my thumb. I will tell you whose they are when it is time. Not before. Cedar Bluff is the kind of town where the same 80 families have been marrying each other since the timber ran out. Cole Bannister grew up 4 streets from the house I grew up in. His father drank himself out of the picture early, and my father filled the gap the way some men do, not with softness but with structure. He taught Cole to shoot behind the grain elevator. He made him run the fire road until he threw up and then made him run it again. When Cole made it through the pipeline and got his trident, my father framed a picture of him in dress blues and put it on the mantel. Dead center. Where you would put a son. My own picture was not on that mantel. There was a school photo of me somewhere from the 11th grade. In a hallway. Near the bathroom. I am not telling you that to make you feel sorry for me. I am telling you so you understand the geometry of that living room. In my father's house, Cole was the tip of the spear. I was, at best, the person who kept the lights on for the people who mattered. There was one other picture in that house, and it did not sit on the mantel. It sat on my father's dresser, face down half the time. A small square black and white of 2 young men in jungle fatigues with their arms around each other's necks, grinning like they were going to live forever. My father never said the name of the man on the left. In 50 years I heard him say it exactly twice, both times after too much whiskey, both times in a voice I did not recognize. The name was Tuck. I did not understand that dresser photo when I was a girl. I understand it now. Hold on to it. It comes back. I drove up the day of the ceremony. 6 hours on 2-lane roads with the good coffee sweating in a box on the passenger seat. I got to the Halsey Post a little before noon, and I carried the coffee in through the kitchen door, and the first person I saw was Cole. He was standing by the urn in his dress uniform, ribbon squared away, looking like the recruiting poster my father always wanted him to be. He was talking to 2 older men, and he was smiling the way you smile when you have said the same 3 sentences 40 times that day. And then he saw me. I have watched a lot of faces change. It is part of the job now, and it was part of the job before. I know what it looks like when someone realizes the pain is worse than they thought, and I know what it looks like when they realize it is not. What happened on Cole Bannister's face when he saw me across that kitchen was neither of those. The color went out of it, all at once. The way it goes out of a man who has just heard a sound he has spent years telling himself he would never hear again. His right hand came up without him deciding it, and his fingers found the inside of his left elbow. And they pressed there, on a spot under the sleeve, and they stayed. He said one word. He said it very quietly, and only I heard it, and it was not my name. Angel. Then somebody clapped him on the shoulder and pulled him back into the crowd, and the moment closed over like water, and I stood there holding a box of coffee. And I thought, he was not supposed to know. In 13 years I had made sure of a lot of things, and one of them was that no one in this town would ever connect the woman helping with the food to the voice in that valley. And now in the space of 2 seconds, over a coffee urn, I had lost that. I just did not know yet how completely. The reception filled up the way those things do, slow and then all at once. Men my father's age in ball caps that told you exactly which war they had gone to. A few younger ones, quieter, who stood near the walls and watched the doors. And I knew them without being introduced, because I stand near walls and watch doors too. My mother, Carol, moved through it all with a coffee pot, refilling cups nobody had finished, which is her way of loving people she cannot find the words for. My sister Rachel worked the room with a bright, tired energy, telling everyone how proud we all were. And at the center of it, holding court by the bar, was my father. He was in his element. He had a ranger's posture even at 72, and he had a young war hero at his elbow, and he had an audience. And those 3 things together made him 20 years younger. I watched him from across the room with a paper cup of my own coffee going cold in my hand, and I felt something I had felt at 100 family dinners, a kind of low, banked heat that I had gotten very good at sitting on. He was telling the valley story. Not my valley. He did not know about my valley. He was telling Cole's version, the version that had made it into the newspaper, about a team pinned down on a ridge and a young frogman who held the line. He told it well. He had told it a lot. And when he got to the part where the air support came in and broke the enemy assault, he waved his hand at the ceiling like the aircraft were a minor character, a bit of weather, and he moved right on to Cole. An old friend of his, a man named Doyle, noticed me by the wall. He is not a cruel man. He asked, loud enough to carry, whether that was my girl over there, and what I was up to these days. My father did the thing he always does. He made a sound in his throat, half a laugh, the sound of setting something down that is not worth carrying. That's Dana, he said. She did her time too. Air Force. He let a beat go by, the way a man does when he is about to give the crowd what it came for. Comms, mostly. She had a headset and a roof over her the whole war. We're proud of her. And here he put his hand on Cole's shoulder. The way you steady yourself on something solid. But this right here is the real thing. This is a man who was in the dirt. Dana never saw the war. She watched it on a screen, in a good chair, with a bad cup of coffee. That was as close as she got. A few people laughed. Not cruelly. That is the part that is hard to explain to anyone who did not grow up in a room like that. Nobody in that hall was trying to hurt me. My father genuinely believed what he was saying. Doyle laughed because it was a warm, easy joke about a proud family. And I stood by the wall with my cold coffee, and I did the only thing I have ever really known how to do when the ground goes out from under me. I got still. I found the copper taste. I felt my own pulse and I made it slow, 60 and then under. A thing I taught myself in a place I could not have described to that room if I had wanted to. My back went straight, and my right hand went into my breast pocket, without me telling it to, and closed around 2 flat pieces of metal that have been warm from my own body for 13 years. And I held them, and I said nothing. I want to tell you I said something devastating. I did not. I have run through it 1,000 times since, all the things I could have said, and every one of them sounds, in my mouth, like exactly the bragging my father raised me to be ashamed of. That is the trap he built, so long ago that neither of us remembered building it. If I stayed quiet, I was a mouse. If I spoke, I was a braggart. There was no version of me that room was prepared to see, so I gave them the one they expected. I smiled a small smile at Doyle, and I said the coffee was getting low, and I went to help my mother. Here is the part nobody was watching. While my father was landing his joke, I was watching Cole. He had stopped smiling. He was standing at my father's elbow, in the spot my father kept steadying himself on, and he was looking at the floor, and his jaw was working like a man chewing on something that would not go down. When my father said Dana never saw the war, I watched Cole's hand come up again to the inside of his left elbow and press there, hard, and I watched him open his mouth. And I watched him close it. Because what do you say? He was 25 feet from the man who taught him to shoot, at a party in his honor, and the price of the truth was blowing up the whole afternoon. So he swallowed it. I understood. I had been swallowing it for 13 years. I found my mother in the kitchen. She was arranging the sheet cake, the one with the flag on it in blue and red gel, and she did not look up when I came in, and after a second she said, in a low voice, not to me exactly, "He doesn't know what he's saying." And I said, "He knows exactly what he's saying, Mom. He just doesn't know what he doesn't know." And she stopped arranging the cake, and she put one hand flat on the counter, and she said something that I did not understand until much later. She said, "I kept every letter you ever sent me. 20 years of them." He never read a single one. Then Rachel came in for more napkins and the moment was gone. I stepped out the kitchen door to get air. The back lot of the Halsey post looks out on a chain-link fence and a field going gold at the edges. And there was an old man out there in a Vietnam ball cap, leaning on a push broom he was not pushing. His name was Earl. He runs the post, sweeps the floor every morning whether or not anyone pays him, which nobody does. He looked at me for a while, the way old men do when they have decided not to pretend. "You were downrange," he said. It was not a question. I did not answer him. You do not confirm and you do not deny. It becomes a reflex. It never leaves. Earl nodded like I had said yes anyway. He looked back out at the field. "Some wars don't leave a mark anybody can see," he said. "Don't make the ground you stood on any softer." Then he went back to leaning on his broom. And I stood there in the cold with the field going gold. And for a minute I let myself feel 13 years of tired. I did not know that inside, at that exact moment, Cole Bannister was asking the Navy captain a question. I did not know that the captain was pulling a folded paper out of his own breast pocket, or that the two of them were looking across the room at me through the kitchen window, or that in less than an hour a man was going to set down a silver star and refuse to pick it up. I only knew the field was gold and my coffee was gone, and my father thought I had watched my whole war on a screen. They called us in for the ceremony a little after 2. The folding chairs got turned to face the small stage at the end of the hall, and the flag got straightened, and the coffee urn finally stopped hissing. My father took a chair in the front row, dead center, the mantelpiece seat, with my mother on one side and an empty chair on the other that I understood was not for me. I sat in the back, near the kitchen door, near the exit, where I could see the whole room the way I always sit. The Navy captain spoke first. His name was Ellison, and he had the flat, unhurried voice of a man who has read a lot of citations over a lot of flag-draped nothing. He talked about the ridge, and the assault, and the hours Cole's team held on ground they should not have been able to hold. He talked about valor in a way that did not sound like a word from a poster when he said it. And then he pinned the silver star to Cole Bannister's chest, and the room stood and clapped, and my father clapped hardest of all, and his face was open and shining in a way I had not seen since I was a very small girl, before I understood what I would and would not be to him. Cole stepped up to the microphone to say his thank yous. He set the medal down. He unpinned it, right there, with the whole room watching, and he set it on the podium and he left his hand flat on top of it. And the clapping trailed off into that quiet I told you about at the start, the quiet where 61 people stopped breathing at the same time. I've practiced this speech, Cole said. I'm not going to give it. He looked at the medal under his hand. There's a piece of that night that's been classified for 13 years. Some of it still is. But last month enough of it got signed off that I'm allowed to say one thing out loud that I've wanted to say for a long time. His voice was steady, but the inside of his left elbow, I saw it, his thumb was pressing there again. When we were pinned on that ridge, we were going to die. All of us. The air that came in and broke that assault didn't come because a computer sent it. It came because there was a voice on the radio who stayed on the net when the whole valley was screaming, who walked ordnance and so close I could feel the heat of it on my face. Danger close, closer than the book allows, because that was the only math that got any of us home. He stopped. He looked at the young men standing along the wall. The enemy had a name for that voice. We were listening to their net. They called it Malik al-Maut, the angel of death. We just called it the angel. Down the wall, one of the quiet young chiefs, a man I had never met, set his beer down on the folding table beside him without looking at it. Then he stood up straight. He did not salute. He just came to attention, the way your body does something before your mind catches up. And he stared at Cole, and then he started, very slowly, to turn his head and look around the room, like he already knew and did not want to be right. My father was still smiling. It was starting to look like a thing left out in the weather. For 13 years I let people believe the angel was some drone jockey 1,000 miles away, Cole said. Because that's what the story allowed. It wasn't true. The angel was on the ground. In the dirt. With us, and then Cole Bannister lifted his eyes off that medal, and he looked across 61 people and a sheet cake with the flag on it, all the way to the back of the room, to the chair by the kitchen door. Master Sergeant Merritt, he said. I've been trying to say thank you for 13 years. Ma'am. My father's smile did not fall so much as it dissolved. I watched it go. He turned in his front row seat, the mantel seat, and he looked back at me, and then at Cole, and then back at me, and he shook his head, one small time, and he said the word out loud without meaning to. He said, no, not angry. The way you say it when the arithmetic of your whole life stops adding up in real time. No, she watched a screen. She was comms. He said it to the captain, almost pleading, like a man asking to be corrected. Tell him. She was comms. Captain Ellison had already stood. He had a folded paper out of his own breast pocket, the one I would later learn Cole had asked him to bring. He did not read from it. He just held it. And he said, in that flat, unhurried voice, "The after-action from that ridge was declassified in part last month. I've read it. Sergeant, the man is not wrong." He looked at my father. Not unkindly. "Your daughter controlled that airspace for 4 hours under fire." "Sir, the record uses the word extraordinary." "The record does not use that word." The room stood up. Not in a wave, the way it had for the metal, all at once and easy. It stood in pieces, chair by chair, a few and then a few more. Men who had spent their lives near enough to war to understand exactly what 4 hours on a net under fire costs a human being. And they stood and they turned. And 61 faces that had watched me carry in coffee turned around and found the woman by the kitchen door. And I sat there very straight with my pulse under 60 and 2 dog tags going warm in my pocket. And I did not stand. And I did not cry. Because you do not cry when you take a hit. You assess. That was the first thing that happened. It is the part that would make the movie. I need you to know it is not the part that matters. The ceremony broke apart into noise and moving bodies, the way these things do, but it broke slowly, like people were afraid to make too much sound. Nobody came at me all at once. They came the way you approach something you are not sure of. The young chief was first. The one who had set his beer down. He crossed the room, and he did not offer his hand right away. He just stood in front of me at a respectful distance and looked at me for a second. The way you look at a man you were told was only a story. "We all heard about the angel." "Ma'am," he said. "Every school I went through. Somebody told it. Nobody ever said it was a person you could walk up and shake hands with." It was not quite a question, and I did not answer it. And he nodded like he had expected exactly that. And he took my hand. And his grip said the thing his mouth could not. My sister Rachel came next. She had spent 43 years being the easy daughter, the one who stayed close and married local and never made anybody rearrange the room. And I watched her walk over with her whole face undone. She opened her mouth twice and nothing came out. Finally, she said, "You let me think." And she stopped. And I understood she was not angry at me. She was angry at herself, for how little it had cost her to believe the small version. For all the years she had said we're proud of Dana in the same breath as you know, comms. All those times you said the coffee was bad, she said. That was the whole answer, wasn't it? That was you telling me, and me not hearing it. I told her the coffee really had been bad. It was the truth and it was a mercy and it was all I had. She laughed. And then she was not laughing, and she put her arms around me, and my sister held on to me in the back of that hall like she was checking that I was real. My mother did not come over. My mother stood by the sheet cake with both hands pressed over her mouth, and she was not looking at me. She was looking at my father, with an expression I had never seen on her in 70 years. Something that was not quite triumph and not quite grief. The look of a woman watching a man finally be handed a thing she had been trying to give him for 4 decades. She had known. She had always known. She kept the letters. But my father did not come to me in the crowd. He got up out of his front row chair, and he walked, stiff on the bad knee, out the side door into the little room where the post keeps the folded flags and the photographs of the local dead. And after a moment, Cole followed him. And after another moment so did I. It was quiet in that room. Glass cases and dim light and the smell of old paper. My father was standing with his back to the door, looking at a wall of framed faces, young men from this county who did not come home, and his shoulders were not a ranger's shoulders anymore. Cole stood a few feet away. He had the medal in his hand. "I'm sorry, Walt," Cole said. "I couldn't sit there and let you say it. Not that. Not with her in the room." My father did not turn around. Cole looked at me, and then he did the thing I did not expect. The thing that turned the whole day from a story into something I have to carry. He rolled up his left sleeve. There is a scar on the inside of Cole Bannister's left elbow. It is old and pale and about 2 inches long, and it is not the kind of scar you get from a bullet or a blade. My father turned around when Cole started talking, and he looked at it. After the air broke the assault, we had a lull, Cole said. His voice was not steady now. I was hit bad. Femoral. I was bleeding out on that mountain, and the medevac was grounded. Weather and fire. They couldn't get a bird in for over an hour. In our world, when that happens, when a man is emptying out and there's no blood to give him, somebody who matches opens up their own arm and gives it to him directly. Fresh, whole blood, arm to arm. We call the person who can do that the walking blood bank. You have to be the right type. You have to be O-negative to give it to just about anyone. He looked at me. He was crying now, openly, a big grown seal in his dress uniform. She got off the net long enough to open her own arm and put her blood into mine. Then she got back on the net. She kept me alive with her own body, and she kept the rest of us alive with her voice at the same time. And then she never told a soul, and I let the world think it was a machine. The room was very quiet. My father was looking at the scar on Cole's arm like it was a language he had spent his whole life refusing to learn. For 13 years, Walt, Cole said, I've had your daughter's blood in my body. It's still there. It's part of what I'm made of now. That man out there you keep calling the real thing. That man is alive because of the daughter you say never saw the war. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, a young man's gesture. She saw more of it than any of us. She just carried it quiet. I had not planned to say anything. I have told you that about myself, that I always say yes and never say the true thing. But my hand had been in my pocket that whole time, and I took it out, and I opened it, and in it were the 2 dog tags I have carried since 2012. One of them is mine. The other one belonged to a 22-year-old named Marco Ruiz, who was Cole's swim buddy, and who was hit in the same lull, and who I could not keep alive, because there is only so much one arm can give, and I made a choice on that mountain about who I could still save, and Marco was not on the side of that choice. I held the tags out flat so my father could see them. I didn't keep quiet because it was a secret, I said. It was the most I had said to him in years. I kept quiet because I came home and Marco didn't, and it never felt like mine to be proud of. My father looked at the tags in my open hand, at the name that was not mine stamped into the metal. I gave what I had, Dad. It wasn't enough for everybody. That's the part I've been carrying. Not the medal. That. My father, Walt Merritt, 72 years old, Army Ranger, who had divided the world into 2 kinds of people for 50 years and put me on the wrong side of the line, sat down. Not in a chair. There was a bench along the wall, and he found it more than sat on it, the way an old man does when his knees decide for him, and he put his face in his hands, and he cried. It was not a movie cry. Old men cry a different way. It is not loud. It is just tired. The sound of a man who has been carrying the wrong thing for a very long time and has just felt the weight of it change hands. Here's where I am supposed to tell you that it healed everything. That my father looked up from that bench a changed man and we drove home into a sunset. I am not going to tell you that, because it would be a lie, and I have already told you enough lies in this story to last me. I was angry at Cole. I want to say that plainly, because everyone who hears this expects me to be grateful, and I was. But underneath the gratitude I was furious, and it took me a long time to understand why. That valley was mine. Marco was mine. The quiet I kept around it was not a wound I was hiding. It was a grave I was tending. And Cole opened it in front of a room full of strangers because he could not stand the injustice one more second. His reasons were good. His reasons were the best reasons a person can have. And he still did not ask me. He gave me back to myself in public, and part of getting yourself back is deciding when. He took that from me while he was giving me everything else, and both of those things are true at the same time. And I have stopped trying to make them cancel out. That is the thing nobody tells you about being seen. You spend your whole life wanting it, and then it happens on somebody else's schedule, in somebody else's words, and you find out that a truth said for you is not quite the same as a truth you get to say yourself. I do not know if I would trade it back. I only know it was not simple. And I have thought a lot, since that day, about my father. It would be easy to make him the villain. He handed me the material. But I keep coming back to that dresser photo. The 2 young men grinning like they would live forever. And the name he could only say drunk. My father built a whole world in which the only real war was the one he fought. Because if there were other kinds of war, other kinds of courage, then the specific hell he survived and Tuck did not becomes a coin toss instead of a rule, and a man cannot live 50 years on a coin toss. He needed the line between the two kinds of people to be real. He needed to be on the side of it that made sense of his friend's death. And there is no room, in a world built that carefully, for a daughter whose war was fought with a voice and an open vein. I am not excusing it. He was wrong, and his being wrong cost me things I will not get back. 40 years of a father looking past me to a screen he invented. But I have learned that people rarely tell you they are afraid. They tell you that you never saw the war. They tell you to help with the food. The dangerous thing is almost never loud. It is quiet, and it is sure of itself, and it is usually protecting a wound you cannot see. I stayed quiet for 13 years because I told myself it was how I loved my family, keeping the smaller, easier version of me on the mantle so nobody had to rearrange the room. I know now that was not love. Love does not require you to disappear so that someone else can keep their story intact. That is not peace. That is just a war so quiet that only one person is bleeding. We did not fix it that day. I want to be honest about the shape of what came after, because it is not a bow. It is a series of small, plain things. I mailed Marco Ruiz's dog tag to his mother in Texas about a month later. I had carried it for 13 years because sending it felt like admitting he was gone, and one morning I understood that keeping it was not honoring him. It was just holding the door open on the worst hour of my life, so I would never have to leave that room. I wrote her a short letter. I told her that her son was hit helping his friend, and that he was not alone, and that a stranger held his hand. I did not tell her about the choice I made. Some things you carry so that other people do not have to. She wrote back 4 words. She wrote, "Thank you for staying. I keep that where my father keeps the photo of Tuck. I still give blood twice a year at the Grange. Now I give it in Marco's name. The volunteers do not know what that means, and I do not explain it. It is between me and a mountain." My mother took the box of letters. The 20 years of them my father never read, and she put it on his nightstand, and she did not say anything. And as far as I know, he has started at the beginning. Rachel calls me now. She asks real questions and waits for the real answers. And sometimes the answer is the food was bad and the coffee was worse, because some of it I still cannot say. But she has stopped assuming the small version. Cole's daughter, who is 6, has decided I am her aunt. She calls me Aunt Angel because she heard her dad say it and she thinks it is a nickname about my job. In a way it is. And my father. My father is 72 and his knee is bad, and last winter he was in the hospital for a week. And I drove the 6 hours and I sat with him. And I did not say the thing you are waiting for me to say. I did not tell him I forgive him. I am not there, and I may not get there, and I have decided that is allowed. But I sat with him. I checked his lines, because that is what I do now. And at one point he watched me tape down an IV in his arm and he said, quietly to the ceiling, "You've got good hands." And I said, "I know, Dad." And that was as close as either of us could get. And it was closer than we had been in 40 years. And it will have to be enough, because it is what there is. The tags in my pocket are down to 1 now. Mine. It is worn smooth. Some nights I still put my thumb on it out of habit, feeling for a name that is in Texas now, and finding only my own. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. It took me 13 years and a scar on someone else's arm to understand that the people who love you are not always the ones who can see you, and that being seen at last does not undo the years of being looked past. It only tells you they were real. Have you ever let the people closest to you believe a smaller version of you, just to keep the peace at the table? Have you ever given something to your family that they never even knew to thank you for? Have you ever had to sit with a truth that a stranger understood before your own father ever could? Tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and if this one found you somewhere tender, type the words "I stayed." You are not the only one carrying something quiet. If this story meant something to you, take a second to subscribe, so the next one finds you too. Take care of yourself out there, and I will see you in the next one.